Hello and welcome to this month's regular City and Guilds Maths and English webinar. It's Amanda and Paul with you today as Catherine is still on furlough leave for a few more days. And as always with these regular sessions, we'll be making the slides and recording from the session available on the Maths and English Resource Hub alongside our previous monthly webinars. And also, as usual, can we remind you about signing up for the email alerts if you haven't already done so? Or if you haven't seen any email alerts from us recently, you might want to check which preferences you're subscribed to.
So this is actually the fourth webinar we've done this month. Well, actually the 10th if you count the 3 ESOL sessions and the ones covering Essential Skills Wales, Essential Skills Northern Ireland, the Employability and Bite-Sized Maths and English qualifications, as well as the 3 extra sessions in this slot that have focused on the mitigation process for functional skills. Mitigation isn't quite over yet, and you may have seen the announcement yesterday that we're extending the centre assessment grade submission deadline for most qualifications until the 1st of July. We do want to sort of take this opportunity to pass on our thanks from pass on thanks from our quality teams for the submissions that have already come in. They'll obviously be in touch with you directly if they do have any queries about what has been uploaded or what has been recorded on the declaration form. And onto this month's, in case you missed it. Again, as I said a second ago, we're approaching the end of the grade estimation window for Maths, English, ESOL and employability qualifications. And indeed, the window has already officially closed for Essential Skills Northern Ireland qualifications. Hopefully the extra webinar sessions we've run over the last few weeks have helped to demystify the process, and don't forget the various recorded presentations, FAQs and other resources on our COVID-19 microsite if you still need any sort of reassurance or need to check anything further out about any aspect of that process. We have said this before and perhaps bears repeating, but grade estimation is intended to replace any assessments that were due to be completed between the 20th of March and the 31st of July. Centre assessment grades do need to be supported by relevant evidence, but ultimately they are about making a professional judgment about whether learners would have passed that assessment component by the end of this period, so in 5 and a bit weeks time. So when you're submitting, it's not just about where learners are now or where they might have been on the 20th of March, it's envisaging where they would have been at the end of July.
So we've now run 3 virtual Teach Meet sessions over the last few weeks, all 3 with lots of discussion and idea sharing. We will be sharing the outputs from these once we emerge from the mitigation window, and it's our intention to put some more of these sessions on. The 3 sessions held so far had a range of contributions, although they were focused around a broad theme of remote delivery. Some of the speakers talked about how they had had to quickly reimagine what they do since lockdown, whereas others shared their more long-standing experiences of distance and remote learning.
And we've also been doing a number of virtual networks covering really functional skills at levels 1 and 2, adapting these really from the face-to-face sessions that we ran earlier in the year and intended for anyone who wasn't able to get along to those. Again, we'd like to develop the format of those a little further as we move beyond just talking about functional skills reform. I think we're quite conscious that we don't want them to be too broadcasty. The whole point of networks is networking, to kind of get practitioners together talking and sharing ideas and experiences. So part of our thinking as we move forward will be to look at how we make these even more interactive and participative. And finally, whilst we're still dealing with, in case you missed it, we do, as of last week, have a new email address for the Maths, English, ESOL and employability team. It's pre-employment, pre-employment at cityandguilds.com. The idea behind this was to replace the old FS Reform mailbox. I think functional skills reform say it's old news now, but it feels a bit limiting in scope. But just to obviously reassure you, if you are still using that, or you have recently used that, anything sent to that old FS Reform mailbox will still get to us, and we will still respond to it.
So the main thing we wanted to talk about today is how we can best support you moving forward. We're not going to be running any face-to-face events or networks anytime soon, but in the meantime, we are starting to think a bit more about, to use that horrible phrase, the new normal. These webinar sessions already get a huge amount of traction and have become a semi-regular fixture each month. We'd certainly like to continue with something along these lines, but the summer gives us time to draw breath and think about the wider ecosystem of presentations, meetings, and networking opportunities that we can facilitate.
We'd certainly like to ensure that we have effective channels for keeping you up to date, whether that's operational stuff about our qualifications, assessments, and other resources such as Smart Screen. We would like to customize those a bit more, as we know how infuriating it can be to find those sessions dominated by functional skills when you're sitting, as I am, outside England. We'd also like to try and move away from the idea that we just provide information, and that joining a meeting or another virtual session with us should be predominantly a passive experience. There's certainly a place for sort of broadcasty content, but increasingly we're feeling that we ought to be recording that stuff and making any live sessions we run more interactive. The term community of practice has perhaps become a little bit hackneyed in recent years, but I think we do feel that we should be trying to provide a platform for sharing ideas rather than just trying to pretend that we have all of the answers, because really we don't. And that's what we were trying to do with the Teach Meets that we've run recently, and I think we're certainly feeling that we ought to be, or that there should be a place for a lot more of that. And the other thing, and it's something I've been banging on about for a long time, is that we perhaps as a sector, as a community, need to be better at championing the cause of literacy, language, numeracy and employability skills, not just Sitting Guilds finding its voice, but actually trying to bring the kind of community of people and organisations that think this stuff is quite important and makes a big difference to people's life chances, and perhaps sometimes should be understood a bit better by policy and decision makers.
So here's a few ideas that we've been looking at, just to try and group the sort of things that we have in mind into categories. Networks aren't a new concept, but we want to be clear that they should be more interactive and discursive, more about sharing ideas than us just telling you things. We're thinking that a lot of the information giving that we do should be recorded so that it's accessible to all and easily retrieved. We started to do recorded presentations, especially in the last few weeks with the mitigation process, but we're thinking there's room for a lot more of this. And video presentations could also form part of the mix here.
Another thing we've done quite a lot lately, again with mitigation in mind, has been Q&A sessions. Now that can be a bit of a handling if there are several hundred people on the line, as is typically the case with these sessions, and we have usually had to include the usual caveats about not necessarily being able to answer everyone's questions on the spot. But at the same time, it could be useful as a platform for helping to explain or demystify things or deal with a topical issue. One possible question though, and we'll pose this in a moment, is whether we should have a regular time slot for these, and to what extent should we cap the number of people on the line each time, so everybody there or more of the people involved get a chance to participate.
And building on the recent series of Teach Meets, we'd like to do some more. Again, Teach Meets are a platform for teachers and tutors to share ideas, approaches, resources and experiences with the Maths and English team facilitating the session. Each contribution should be short and snappy, probably no more than a few minutes, and usually these sessions should be quite high paced, so lots of people get the chance to contribute.
And again, we've been doing introduction, briefing, onboarding, updates, whatever you want to call it, sessions for as long as I can remember. But maybe we should try to make these something that follows on from the recorded presentation. So the basics are outlined there, and these are much more about reassuring and clarifying rather than trying to explain things from the beginning. I also think when we do these sessions that there's a lot to be said for creating an environment where it feels okay to ask what might seem the obvious questions or even the daft questions. And then there's another idea, and again, I would emphasize it's no more than an idea at this stage, but if we were to launch a pre-employment or a literacy, language, numeracy podcast, just thinking, would that be something that you'd ever be likely to want to listen to? I guess it's difficult to answer that question without us saying more about the format, length, frequency, but it would be good nevertheless to test that idea out a little bit more. So, okay, and what I'm going to do now is do a few sort of live polls just to sort of firstly see if you're a bit awake this afternoon, but also to give you a chance to sort of share some thoughts on some of the things that we've just been talking about. I will just sort of say apologies in advance if you're listening to the recording, because the polls may feel a little bit frustrating, but what I will say is that if you do have any views on this, we'd very much appreciate an email into the new pre-employment mailbox if you have any particular ideas you want to share, indeed even if you are listening to this live and there are other things that you might want to share with us, by all means do so. So I'm going to start with the first poll, and we'll just hit the launch button for this, and hopefully if I can check the audience view and check that you can see this. Hopefully, would you be likely to engage with any or more than these? And obviously tick all of them that apply. Looks like about 16% of you voted so far, so I'm going to give you a few more seconds to kind of keep answering. It's looking kind of good. Yeah, just about 2/3 of you voted now, 70%. Okay, I'm going to close that poll now. Just in terms of just to share the answers quickly, or to share the sort of responses, and thank you very much for those. Looks like recorded presentations proving quite popular, networks proving quite popular, live Q&A sessions likewise. About half of you saying you'd be interested in a podcast. That's kind of interesting as a starter, so thank you for that. I'm going to go to the second poll now. See how you feel. Go on this one. This is a yes/no answer on this one. If we were, well, when we do our next sort of teach meet sessions, would you be at all interested in having a slot at these? Again, I know when we used to do the polls last year, I used to play the countdown music in the background, and that's probably a good idea that we don't continue to do that, but nevertheless, this is going. So it looks like most of you voted now. So I'm going to give you a few more seconds because I think most people have now voted, and we're going to close that. So yes, thank you, and particularly thank you to the 27% of you that said you would be willing to have a slot at these. We may well hold you to that. Well, we may not, because this was a secret ballot, so we don't necessarily know. But nevertheless, thank you for your interest, and that's good as a way of gauging kind of interest for those. So another poll.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, Paul, if people were interested in presenting at the slot, they can drop us a line to the pre-employment inbox to say so.
Absolutely, yes. So please do that. I guess that will depend a little bit on when we relaunch those, and we're certainly planning to do that sooner rather than later. So yes, if you're interested, and also, yeah, to what in particular you might like to talk about during your slot as well. I'm going to give another poll now, which was if we were to hold a regular Q&A session, and presupposing that we were, Would you prefer it if we did those during a regular time slot, or if we mixed and matched the times? Because I think we're always conscious that, particularly because we've had a pattern of doing these sessions on a Wednesday afternoon, which is great if you're regularly free on a Wednesday afternoon, but if you're regularly teaching at that time, it's probably not so great for you. So just to really get a sense of, would it be good for us to mix and match, or to vary when we do these sessions? Give it a few more minutes, or a few more seconds rather. Okay. Okay, I'm going to draw a close to that. Actually, fairly evenly matched on that. So 47% of you saying regular slot, please, and 53% saying a variety. I guess that's edging towards varying it. So again, that's grateful. Thank you. And again, I think same goes for the other ones. If you've got any strong views either way, by all means, email us as well. Okay, one more question. Is the idea of a podcast worth exploring? Okay, most people have voted. I'll just give it a few more seconds. Okay, most people do seem to have voted now, so I'm going to close that one. Looks like kind of fairly even split between a yes and a not sure, and only 8% people saying definitely not. So thank you again for that. And again, I guess it's a difficult question to answer without us saying a little bit more about what that might, or us exploring a little bit more what that might look like. But thanks anyway. That's great to have. And then just one more question. Appreciate quite a few questions to throw with you at one go. And again, this is one where there isn't just one answer. It's whatever you fancy ticking, and please select any of these that apply. So how much, and this is really sort of a broader question, how much would you look to us for information about this whole kind of arena of literacy, language, numeracy, employability? Would it be purely in relation to our own products and services, our own qualifications and related stuff? But is it as part of a wider conversation? And then obviously the fourth option here is an anything else, and by all means, it says here add to the Q&A box, but by all means drop us an email as well if you've any particular thoughts as well. Okay, it's about 2/3 of you voted. I'm going to give it another few seconds just to get to the end of that. Okay, I think most people have now voted on that, so thank you again for those. That brings the polling to a close for this afternoon, so I'm going to go back to the slide deck and bring us really to the close of today's session. So
that really was the main input that we had, wasn't it, Paul? But we have got 10 minutes or so to have a quick look at the questions. Where you have written something in the question box, we will take that offline, but there are a couple in here that we might be able to respond to now, Paul. I noticed there's one around booking tests to take place following the 1st of August. If you have a look in the walled garden, there's a notice at the top of the 4748, 02 and 04 pages, which give you the dates where booking for paper tests will be available, or for on screen as well. I think Michael asked that question. There was a comment here regarding City and Guilds forcing everyone to pursue this calculated results route. It's probably worth saying this isn't a City and Guilds decision. So Ofqual and the Department for Education have given all awarding organisations the steer that they must pursue calculated results for any learners who were taking their tests between the 20th of March and the 31st of July. And that's the direction we've been given from the policymakers. And so it's not something we've chosen to do. We would hate for you to think that this was something that we just came up with as a solution to the current situation. And somebody else asked if they got some assessments which they did with some learners that have been marked, should they claim these? The answer to that is the same, really. The direction of travel is centre assessed grades, so you shouldn't be claiming anything as normal through the walled garden now, but you can use that information to support your judgment as to the grade that the learner should achieve in your submission. And just to reinforce what Paul said earlier, the date for the submissions has been moved to the 1st of July, and I think probably the website hasn't caught up with that, has it, Paul?
Yeah, literally the announcement came out yesterday, so I think if you still see 26th of June anywhere, that should catch up in the next day or so. I think we're conscious that every single document that we've produced about the submission process, well, most of the documents that we've produced have probably got 26th of June on them. So obviously the decision to kind of give everybody an extra few days was only literally only taken yesterday. So it is just, hopefully will give people a little bit of breathing space. There is another question that does seem to.
I'm just going to say the intention is that shouldn't affect the results release date of the 31st of July, and the intention is that all the results for functional skills and ESOL will be released on that date. Where there might be, our quality team might need to liaise with a centre about their submission, you will hear from them in the next, once the quality process starts. So you will be aware if there's any chance that your results will be affected by that quality process. But the intention is that we will stick with that 31st of July for the results issue.
Yes, yeah, and also just to be clear, it is at all of the results that are kind of resulting from this process will come out on that single day. So it's a bit like the sort of traditional pattern of results day that certainly anybody who's familiar with our technicals will be used to, and certainly in the case of general qualifications. So that sort of notion of all the results will appear in one go. So I guess that also helps from the point of view of being clear for your own purposes what's been issued as a result of this process versus what might have come through normal kind of exams being taken or results being issued. Anything issued on the 31st of July will be very clearly a part of this process.
Somebody's asked a question about if you're signed up for ESOL alerts, you will have had an ESOL alert talking about a webinar that's taking place next week about our lovely digital platform, Journey to English. We're going to record that webinar, which is the lady who is responsible for developing that platform is going to give us a walkthrough. So if you can join us and you're interested, please do sign up. But we will record it and we will put it up on the website for people to see.
Yes, yeah, it's probably a good example of one of those ones where we would sort of look. I mean, I guess it's a bit of a hybrid, that session next week, because it will be a live session, but there will be a recording of it available, and the idea obviously the recordings available for everyone.
Yeah. Oh, here's a question that hasn't been asked before. Debbie saying, if I submit a no submission for the calculated grade, can the candidate sit the exam at a later date when we return to normal testing? Yes, Debbie, they can. And at the moment, there is no provision for functional skills exams to be done remotely. So learners couldn't sit their exams at home. this is something we always continue to explore what might be possible with modern technology, but certainly moving forward, that's not going to be available.
Another question just that seems to be coming through, which was about the new pre-employment email address and kind of is it okay if that's shared with colleagues? And I think the answer is yes, please, absolutely. The only thing to say about it, and it's a bit like the old FS Reform email address in the sense that it is kind of, if you like, questions for us as a Maths and English team. So it's kind of qualifications that relate specific, or questions that relate specifically to our area, sort of, if you like, the sort of bog standard operational. We haven't had our certificates through, well, you wouldn't have certificates at the moment anyway, but we haven't had our certificates through type operational questions should still go through our customer services team as normal. But if there are bits of comments or feedback or things that you specifically like us as a team to have a look at, then by all means use that. Just trying to think of any other questions that worth,
well, that we haven't already answered.
Yes, yeah.
Paul has asked whether the results will be on Secure Assess or just Walled Garden. I'll be honest, Paul, I don't know the answer to that, and that's something that we'll go away and find out, and we could probably add to the FAQs.
Yes, yeah. I mean, if we're talking about this process specifically, then I would imagine, because Secure Assess is our platform just for operating online tests, but yes, that is one we'll double check, I think, and be certain about. Walled Garden obviously should be where the formal confirmation appears.
And for legacy functional skills English, you will have submitted the centre assessed grades for the components being judged that way, and you may have, the learner might have achieved other elements successfully in the past. For legacy functional skills, you will still, once you have the results, need to submit the certification code.
For English, that is, yes.
Yes. Sorry, did I not say it? Sorry.
Yeah.
My own little world.
Benefit. Yes, yeah.
So somebody's asked about the last dates for testing. So this morning I had the email come through for a final check. So I'm hoping that if that doesn't go out first thing tomorrow, it should go out before the end of the day tomorrow. In the meantime, if you look at the 3748 qualification page, I've put the table, the timeline table for dates on the qualification page if you're too keen and you're not ready to wait for the email. Somebody's asked about another set of maths sample papers. So the third set of paper-based samples went on the website. I'm chasing the mark scheme because that hasn't arrived yet. And we've had due to staff being furloughed in the technical team, we haven't actually managed to get those onto Open Assess yet, but I'm going to pick that up later with this week with the team, because they're all returning to work at the end of this week, I hope. And then we're anticipating a fourth sample to be available before the end of August. I'm chasing for that quite hard.
Yes, yeah. The plan was always to have 4 of everything,
yes.
So we will. It's just really a case of when we get there. And I guess one of the things that lockdown has kind of one of the things that has resulted from lockdown has been a little bit, obviously, a little bit of a disruption to how quickly we could bring that about. But again, that plan still holds.
I think we've probably just got time for one question. Andrew asks whether centres will be able to claim funding with a calculated result. There is going to be no difference for the learner between a calculated result and a result achieved through normal testing, and that's the same for the funding situation as well. These results will stand under their own merit, really. So is there anything else, Paul? I'm aware that we're creeping over the edge of our time. Is there anything else there that you
just
see?
trying to see if there's any other questions. There are a couple of questions. Oh, there's one question about certificates, and will we, when we do resume issuing hard copy certificates, will those kind of catch up with everybody? The answer is yes. I mean, they are on hold for the time being. You can, if you haven't already done so, sign up to receive e-certificates from us, and quite a few centres have been doing that because obviously it has the advantage of the certificate exists in electronic form, in PDF form anyway, and obviously learners can have that in the meantime. But yes, yeah, any hard copy certificates that are pending, I think they'll probably arrive in a big pile when we do start resuming the issue of those. I'm not 100% certain when that's going to be, but I know there is a plan to do that at some point.
But the e-certificates will be available when the results are issued, so that will be the proof that
they'll issue instantly. Yeah. So you get those immediately. It's the hard copy ones you may have to wait a little bit.
I am aware that there were more questions asked here than we've responded to, but we'll pick these up. Some of these will need to go into the FAQs because they're questions that individuals need that would be appropriate for everybody, but there are some individual questions here which we'll pick up offline. So I think it just remains to say thank you, Paul. Thank you for everybody who contributed to the polls. That's going to be really useful for us moving forward to make our plans. And we look forward to speaking to you next month when we'll have Catherine back.
Yeah, I should have all three of us next month for this session. So yeah, we'll look forward to that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks and bye for now.
Bye.